On the morning of March 17, 2000, the quiet hills of Kanungu, Uganda, lit up in flames. A church had burned to the ground. But this was no ordinary fire. Inside that small building were over 300 bodies. Men, women, and children. All dressed in their Sunday best. All burned beyond recognition. Some were still clutching Bibles. Others had been nailed shut inside the building before it was set ablaze. At first, the world thought it was suicide. Another tragic doomsday cult that decided to leave this earth in peace. But what investigators found later was far more sinister. Mass graves began appearing around Uganda. Dozens of bodies stuffed into pit latrines. Others buried under school buildings. Some poisoned. Some strangled. Children, elders, entire families. The death toll rose from 300 to nearly 800. This was not a suicide. This was a mass murder orchestrated by people who claimed to speak for God. And the question everyone asked was, how did this happen? How did a group that preached about salvation, honesty, and the Ten Commandments become one of the most deadly cults in history? The answer lies in the twisted minds of two people. One was a failed politician. The other, a barmaid who claimed the Virgin Mary spoke directly to her. Together, they created a doomsday empire built on fear, manipulation, and blind devotion. And when their prophecy failed to come true, they didn't step down. They lit a match and burned everything behind them. This is the story of the movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God, and the 700 souls who never saw the year 2000. But before we descend deeper into this harrowing journey, I ask you to take a second to like this video, and subscribe to the channel if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, because history doesn't just repeat itself. Sometimes, it hides in plain sight. To understand the fire, you must first understand the flame lighters. Her name was Credonia Mwerinde, a former barmaid, known for her charisma and strange visions. She claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to her, delivering a chilling message. The world would end with the dawn of the year 2000. She wasn't alone. Enter Joseph Kibwetere, a once respected Catholic and failed politician. When Credonia found him, he was grieving, lost after the death of his children. But to her, he was the perfect frontman, soft-spoken, authoritative, and devout. Together, they birthed the movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. On the surface, it was a strict religious community focused on piety, obedience, and preparing for the end times. But beneath that robe of righteousness was a machine of psychological control. Their doctrine was simple, but absolute. Speak only when necessary. Do not sin. Do not question. And never, ever doubt the words of Credonia. They preached that the apocalypse would strike at the turn of the millennium. Anyone who disobeyed their commandments, anyone who dared think independently, would burn in hellfire. Literally, people came in droves. Not just the desperate or uneducated. Farmers, school teachers, civil servants, even a former priest. Entire families sold their homes and gave all their possessions to the cult. They believed they were saving their souls. And the leaders? They claimed not to own anything. They lived humbly like the rest. But that was a lie. A lie built on fear, illusion, and the deep psychological need to believe in something, anything, when the world outside feels cruel and chaotic. In rural Uganda, where poverty was widespread and government corruption was the norm, the promise of a holy refuge was seductive. And Credonia knew it. She positioned herself not just as a prophet, but as the mother of salvation. Her word became law. Her visions became doctrine. And every time she predicted the world's end and it didn't come, she pushed the date just a little further ahead. But time was running out. And for those trapped inside the cult's walls, hope was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Inside the walls of the movement, time stood still, because the end of the world was always just around the corner. The followers of Credonia Mwerinde and Joseph Kibwetere lived under a regime more strict than any military. They were no longer just members. They were soldiers of salvation. Every day began with prayer, confession, and silence. Talking was discouraged unless it was necessary. Laughter was considered sinful. Even soap was forbidden, because personal cleanliness, they claimed, was a distraction from spiritual purity. Children were raised in this system. They didn't go to school. They didn't play. They fasted. They memorized commandments. And they feared the outside world, a place they were taught was damned. But what made the movement so dangerous wasn't just its discipline. It was its absolute control over reality. Credonia's visions became the calendar. Kibwetere's sermons became law. And every delay in the world's end only increased the pressure. Followers were told, "The world is sinful. We are the chosen. When the fire comes, only we will survive. People believed it. They gave up their land, their savings, their livestock. Some even handed over their children to be raised by the cult's inner circle. They waited for December 31st, 1999, the final day. But when January 1st, 2000 came, and nothing happened, doubt spread like a virus. Some began asking questions. Where was the apocalypse? Why were they still alive? What else had the leaders lied about? Credonia had an answer ready. She declared that the Virgin Mary had postponed the end, a divine act of mercy, but only for a short time. And this time there would be no more delays. The final date was set, March 17, 2000. In preparation, the cult threw what looked like a grand farewell celebration. Animals were slaughtered. Followers dressed in their finest clothes. They ate, drank, and danced, for the first time in months. But behind the joy was something darker. Windows were boarded up, doors were locked, and gasoline was quietly poured. No one suspected that this final party was not about escaping Earth. It was about erasing the truth. Because if Credonia couldn't save her prophecy, she would burn everything that proved her wrong. March 17, 2000. The sun rose over the hills of Kanungu like any other morning. But by midday, smoke could be seen for miles. The church, once a sacred sanctuary, had become an inferno. Witnesses would later say they heard singing just moments before the explosion. Inside, over 330 men, women, and children were locked in. Nailed windows. Barred doors. No way out. The fire consumed them all. At first, the world believed this was a mass suicide. A group so devoted to their cause, they chose to perish rather than face the truth. But the truth was uglier. Just days later, Ugandan police began uncovering mass graves across the country. Dozens of bodies, some poisoned, others stabbed, many children. One site had 153 corpses, another 155, and another held 81 bodies, decomposing beneath a cult-owned building. This wasn't a one-day tragedy. It was a systematic, premeditated massacre. Autopsies revealed disturbing details. Victims had been strangled with banana fibers, their throats slit before being buried. In some cases, acid had been poured over corpses, to hide the smell. Police quickly shifted their narrative. This was not mass suicide. This was mass murder, disguised as devotion. But by the time authorities realized the scale of the horror, the cult's leaders had vanished. Credonia Mwerinde, Joseph Kibwetere, Joseph Kasapurari, John Kamagara, Dominic Katarababo. All 5 top members disappeared. Some believe they died in the fire. Others say they escaped, using the chaos as cover. To this day, not a single one has been captured. No one has been held accountable. The Ugandan government, embarrassed and under pressure, quietly closed the case. The media moved on, and the world forgot. But survivors didn't. Families were left digging their own relatives from mass graves. Mothers lost children. Entire communities were scarred, haunted by what had been done in the name of salvation. The movement promised paradise. What it delivered was an orchestrated, holy genocide, carried out by those who claimed to serve God. And the final horror? The people who lit the match may still be alive. The fire burned out. The graves were uncovered. But the masterminds behind Uganda's deadliest cult? They vanished into the shadows. Joseph Kibwetere, the public face of the movement, was last seen walking calmly just days before the fire. Some say he perished with his followers in the church. Others believe he faked his death and slipped across the border. His face was plastered across newspapers. Interpol issued alerts. But not a single confirmed sighting followed. Then there was Credonia Mwerinde, the true architect behind the movement. The one who claimed to speak to the Virgin Mary. The one who inspired the murders of nearly 800 people. She disappeared without a trace. Some survivors believe she's still alive, living under a new identity. Others say she escaped with the cult's remaining funds and was protected by insiders in power. The Ugandan government? They declared the case closed. No arrests, no trials, no justice. And just like that, the movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God faded from the headlines, filed away as another cult tragedy. But this was more than tragedy. It was premeditated slaughter, hidden behind religious robes and divine promises. A movement that began with fear, ended in obliteration. And the most chilling part? The warning signs were there. People raised concerns. Some escaped. Others tried to alert the authorities. But no one listened, until it was too late. This story isn't just about the past. It's about how easily faith can become fanaticism, how ordinary people can be consumed by extraordinary fear, and how some monsters never wear masks, they wear crosses. So now I ask you, what would you do if your loved one joined something like this? Would you recognize the signs? Would you be able to pull them out before the fire came? Let me know what you think in the comments. Was this mass suicide? Or mass murder? Do you believe the leaders are still alive? And if this story moved you, share it. Because silence allows history to repeat itself. In the end, the commandments weren't restored, they were buried, beneath the ashes of blind obedience.